Welcome everyone to the latest SuperversiveSF Sci-Fi Roundtable. We have the usual crew with us, with Jaji, Josh, Ben, Brian, and David. EJ will be along shortly. We also have guests Amy Castling-Sterling. Did I say that right, Amy? And did I butcher your name? I apologize. Amy Sterling. Let's just go with that.
You may use my middle name. That's everybody knows that, so that'll be good.
Okay. Amy. What?
Sterling.
Oh, right. It's Amy Sterling Castling. Amy Sterling it is. It's fine. Let's go with that. And Jeff Dunneman. No, not Jeff. No, how do you pronounce your last name, Jeff?
Dunteman.
Dunteman. I'm sorry. You're not the guy with the puppets.
No. You came a lot closer than most people.
Wait, he's not? I'm leaving.
better, Jason. You can mispronounce my name charmingly.
I'm sorry.
No, that's it's fine. Don't worry.
So
I have a wide range of what I will listen to for my name, and if they fall anywhere within that range, I never correct them. I just figure it's my fault I have a strange name. I'm not going to butcher them about it.
Fair enough.
I'm just Castle. I'll say you know me now because my name really is just Castle.
Sounds good.
Okay. So, Jaji, you had some things you wanted to correct.
Yes, before we got going, there were two things that I wanted to correct from last time. One was that the information that the official Hugo site said that more than 1,000 votes had been discounted was a misreading of their information. It's kind of complicated what it actually said, but the bottom line is no votes were discounted. So everybody's vote counted, and I apologize for having participated in the misinformation on that subject. The other was that based on the Wired article, which I should have known was not correct about anybody because it wasn't correct about anybody I knew, I had been under the mistaken impression that George R.R. Martin had received information from the WorldCon committee specially, and that he might have in fact been behind the scenes urging people to vote no award. This turned out to be, the article is just wrong. George R.R. Martin got the same pink sheet we all got when we walked out, and he had to look around and get one. And I've heard from people who know him that he was actually very dismayed that the Hugo had no awards, that he was sincere in his request that people not do that. So I just wanted to apologize again for, having been mistaken there, and to say that I am putting him back on my must-buy list that I had removed him from when I was kind of annoyed with him. So
okay.
I'm sorry, and we can move on to new stuff.
That's all right. You were wrong on the internet. That must not stand.
I was wrong on the internet, and someone corrected me. Good thing they stayed up all night to do that.
It's all good. All right. So on this episode, on this roundtable, the plan was to discuss: is this a publishing golden age? And so we have a bunch of people here, some who are independently published, some who are running startup publishing houses, some of us who run a really, really tiny press out of our spare bedroom, I suppose.
It's the spare that leads to Narnia.
Yes. I will use the phrase nano press because it sounds ridiculously large to say micro press when it's like literally me. And a few people I can convince to help me. So, yes. All right. So, where to start? We've got a bunch of things to discuss from listeners, and people had things to talk about. So, who would like to go first?
Well, Jason, if I could steal just one more moment, I'd like to say happy birthday to the Superversive literary movement and to Superversive SF.
Woo!
A year ago, October 1st, was when we launched our first article, the Tom Simon's first article on the subject. And so we've made it through a year. I just want to say happy birthday to us.
Awesome.
Yay for Superversive.
Yes.
I should have known that too, because I got nagged by my hosting company going, "Hey, you need to renew your domain or you'll lose it."
So that had to be
By the
you.
way, happy birthday.
Anyway, Tom has promised to write us another article. He wasn't able to get it done by the 1st, but we should have it at some point soon. And when we do, I will post it on the Superversive SF. So we'll have his latest bit. For those of you who don't know, Tom Simon, who is an essayist and a novelist, he is particularly known for his essays on Tolkien. He used the handle Superversive on LiveJournal for years, and he's the one we got the name from. And he says he didn't make it up. He says it came from like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien or someone like that, but we got it from him. So we kind of honor him in using it. So. All right,
Okay.
on to the subject.
On to the actual topic at hand. All right. So, I guess the first question. No. Oh well, actually, no. A better place to start. So, a golden age of publishing. I thought about this from the perspective of things have changed recently for publishing with the event of Amazon and Kindle Direct Publishing, and other outfits like Smashwords and stuff that let anybody basically publish anything they like within reason with some minimal oversight for it's basically sane and readable and works, but that's about it. So anybody, as long as they're willing to put in the effort, is able to publish themselves these days on some platform somewhere, and you can. It's basically free. I mean, it's like I publish Sci-Fi Journal, and my upfront cost for that, apart from paying authors and stuff, is basically zero. If I sell exactly 0 copies, Amazon charges me exactly $0 for hosting it and all the rest of it. And that includes the print version too through CreateSpace. Nobody charges you anything. They just take a cut of sales, and they don't even take a very big cut of sales at that, even really. Or maybe they do, but from what I hear,
they certainly don't compare to traditional publishing, where we got 6%.
Well, this is it. From my perspective, I mean, you know, I sell the magazine for $3.99. They give me not quite 75% of that, or 70% of what. Like, I get the bulk of that, and that's fine. Like, you know, I mean, traditional publishers. I guess from the traditional publisher's perspective, Amazon takes a big cut of the total sale price, but I don't have a middleman. It's just me talking to Amazon. So,
well, I think that's one of the benefits of the situation right now. You know, there's reasons to have an editor. Editors are great. I definitely need one, but it removes some of the middleman, and it's removing, I think, a lot of the barriers that would otherwise stand in the way of things. So
true, but remember, us indie folks have editors too. I have 2 of them, and they're both here, so I can vouch for that.
Well, this is it. There's editors and there's editors. I mean, like, if you want someone to read your work and offer critique of it and that sort of thing, you don't need someone from a big publishing house. You can find someone on Fiverr that will do a reasonable job, so I'm told.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between an editor and an ideological gatekeeper.
Oh, I can't see you guys anymore. I can hear you, but I can't see you. What did I do?
I don't know. Did you hit mute somewhere? I can see you.
No, I've got it.
I mean, I see your little pretty picture in blue.
I got it.
All right, Amy. Seeing as you are probably, well, actually, either between Jeff and Amy, which of you would like to go first? You two would be the closest we have to traditional publishers here. I know Chameleon's still starting up, but it aims to be a traditional publishing house, as I understand it. And Jeff, you seem to have some experience in traditional publishing as well as from the business side of it. So,
sure.
What do you guys think of what's happening?
It is completely and totally amazing. I learned publishing in the Bronze Age. I mean, we used to do ridiculous things like put photographic paper full of letters through a little machine that smears it up with wax, and then we stuck it to pieces of cardboard. And, I mean, I'm not lying and I'm not exaggerating. What has happened is that the capital investment in order to do real publishing has fallen basically to zero. That wasn't the case in the early 1980s when I got into it. You needed a room full of expensive equipment and highly trained people who knew how to use it. And that simply isn't the case anymore. Otherwise, you know, we might have seen independent publishing to a greater extent in the 90s or, you know, maybe the late 80s, but the equipment was very expensive and the skills were kind of arcane. So we've come a long way, that's for sure.
In terms of production, but you still had to, I mean, and it's also the ebook, you know. I mean, you actually have the cost of printing paper books as opposed to the cost of putting out an ebook is vastly different. Publishing, I mean, it's, oh my God, I don't know. Maybe it would be better if people just asked me questions.
One possible approach we could take is there's a writer named Jonathan. I think it's pronounced Moeller, but if it's pronounced differently, I only know him over email. Who sent us a bit of a write-up because he couldn't be here. I could read a bit of it, and then maybe Amy and Jeff could comment on whether their experience is similar or different. Or I mean, if you want to try that.
Sure, that's so nice, Judgy. I think that's a good idea.
Why don't I read, since it's 2 or 3 pages, why don't I read a couple paragraphs and we'll stop, and then we can get back to it if we want to.
Sounds good.
So this gentleman, just to give you a background, he had been trying to be a writer for years, and he had a big trunk of like 20 manuscripts.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
A couple of years ago, I can't remember how long ago now, but it was a couple of years back, he decided to put one up as an ebook. I think he made $11 or 11 sales that month. And the last I checked his numbers, which was a year or two ago, he was up to like 7,000 sales a month. So, and he says the key to him is that he has many different books. None of them individually necessarily, at least originally, did very well. But the fact that he had so many out there. So that's just giving you an idea that this guy's been doing this for a while. I think he even has a book with Castilla House now. He's been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and he's got a bit of experience, and he's seen what works and what didn't work. And before I read it, I'll say, years ago, he used to say anyone should do this. And more recently, he said to me, you know, I didn't realize when I started that my business background is giving me a big advantage I didn't know I needed, and that some other people who I have suggested try this have not been able to do what I do by themselves because they didn't have that. So I thought that was interesting. But this is what he says. A golden age of publishing, ? Is this a golden age for publishing? I would answer this with this statement. In the past 8 years, Amazon and the Kindle and other ebook platforms have done more for readers and writers than traditionally publishing has in the last 30. Why? For writers, the biggest challenge in getting publishing has always been the vast power differential between new writers and publishers. This phenomena is easily noticeable. Writers' message boards and writers' websites were full of discussion about how to craft the perfect query letter, how to best format a manuscript for submission, how to approach agents, and so on. Writers who received a request for a full manuscript or an agency contracted rejoiced, despite the fact that no money had actually changed hands. Once blogs became common, a well-known blog feature, an anonymous agent mocking submissions that did not meet her exacting standards while commenters cheered her a well-known blog featured while commenters cheered her acerbic wit. For most writers, getting published was the holy grail. Unfortunately, conditions for writers inside the walled garden of getting published were just as bad as those outside the wall.
No,
it takes only a very little... What's that?
They're worse.
Yeah, very little research to find abundant tales of editorial incompetence or malice, publisher indifference, royalty payments magically vanishing through the conjured tricks of impenetrable accounting, which I must say I find all the accounting impenetrable for the traditional publishers, even when they try really hard to be clear. Even as recently as the end of September 2005, veteran writer Dean Wesley Smith noted a new accounting trick publishers were using to withhold royalty payments from writers. There is a link, which when we have it, we'll publish it tomorrow on the website. People can follow the link. In short, publishers seem at best incompetent, at worst actively malicious. There were exceptions, of course, but writers who were happy with their publishers for a long time were likely the exception rather than the rule. The reason for this state of affairs was simple. Writers needed publishers did not need writers, and would prefer to deal with them as little as possible. Most of the money came from the big bestsellers, and if a new writer did not like the contract terms, well, there were 100 others to replace him. Like any relationship with an extreme power differential, it was easy for publishers to abuse their power and become convinced that it was just the way the things were done. The e-book revolution and the widespread adoption of devices capable of displaying e-books, smartphones, tablets primarily, changed all this drastically. To paraphrase the writer Clay Shirky, publishing has gone from being a job or an industry or a profession to a button in a web browser. Previously, publishing had been a set of difficult-to-acquire skills, typesetting, printing. We heard of this side, but we just heard from Jeff about pasting photographic paper and so forth. In addition to the warehouse and retail outlets and distribution channels required to sell printed books, now all it takes is a properly formatted file and a functioning internet connection to click on the publish button. Do you guys want to stop at that point and talk about it?
Who is this that wrote this? I'm not sure who this is.
Jonathan Molner, M-O-E-L-L-E-R, and he has like 20, 40 books out there, and he runs a blog about it, and he's a fan of John, so I've known him for some years.
Sure.
And he writes really well on this subject. I always enjoy the posts he puts up on it, so I had asked him to join us, and he's traveling today, so he wrote this instead.
Okay. I mean, that's all very relevant and true from the individual author perspective.
I was going to say I definitely agree with it being a lot easier now. I noticed Jeff mentioned when we were discussing this beforehand that he uses a bit of software called Juto. I assume I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes.
For ebook production, and I use that too. The first edition of Sci-Fi Journal that I put out, I did in Word, following I picked up like a 99-cent book on how to, killer Amazon publishing tips with Word, and I did the whole first one in that, and it was a nightmare. And I was looking around for another solution. I was still trying to use Smashwords at this time, and I ended up having to do 2 complete copies of the magazine, edited slightly differently to fit each one, and it was just such a hassle. And then I found Juto, and it was like, it's $40, and it's so easy. I mean, you still got to put everything together. It takes a bit of time, but you hit the create your ebook button, and it spits out a bunch of different versions, and it'll give you one that's ready to go for printing even. You have to edit that one a little bit to, page and edit properly and stuff, but so easy to use, and it's $40. It's not like thousands of dollars or anything.
Exactly. We have it also. No, we have it also. It's a good program, but we prefer Sigil, and then but all the books are done in InDesign, and then edited in Sigil for upload. So they're very good-looking books. But yeah, each platform is a nightmare. It's an individual nightmare. But Juto is a good program. But for text-based, because we do a lot of things with images, so it's not quite as friendly to that as doing it the other way. So.
No, I'd agree with that. I certainly agree with that.
Good. I mean, one of the nice things about something like this is that if people listening, they can hear, hey, Juto sounds great because I'm not doing images, or maybe that's not for me because I do have to do images. So that's the kind of information we want to share.
At least for small images and not too many of them, with a bit of fiddling in the settings, you can get good-sized images and it works pretty well. Sorry, Jeff, you were going to say something.
Yes, 2 things. First, Amy, what version of InDesign are you using?
We're using Adobe CC, all programs. I know a lot of people don't want to use that, and it's really frustrating because it updates constantly. and it's different to whether it's running on a PC or it's running on a Mac.
Okay.
So some books are better on the Mac, and some books are better on the PC.
That's
That's
funny.
part one. The other question I have for you is, do you lay out a print book as a sort of a master format from which you export ebooks? Is that how you do it?
Yeah, and I know that people say don't do it that way, but I mean, why waste time and effort? And actually, InDesign right now is to the point where it's actually exporting really clean EPUBs. So it's the Kindle process that's the problem. The Kindle files, the CAF8s, are now the problem. But if you have a really clean EPUB, then you can easily make the changes you need in Sigil, and then you can use Kindle Creator to or whatever the little frickin' dealy bob. It will upload your EPUB. For all normal people's intents and purposes, all you have to do is upload the EPUB, and it will convert for you. So it's easy to do that. But if you're going to sell online in other venues, you do need to generate a MOBI. So then you have to generate the MOBI for the people that are sideloading things onto their Kindles. So was that too technical?
No,
that was good.
That was good. Very good.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm non-technical. I mean, I'm telling you, this is all through hard-won experience. So.
Basically, if you're not going to do print publishing, Juto makes InDesign unnecessary. I do my ebooks in Juto, but I'm still deciding whether or not print through a print-on-demand house like Lulu or CreateSpace is even worthwhile.
I am going to put a link to a book that cannot for sure be done in Juto. All right?
Okay.
Just to give us an idea of what.
To give you an idea of the kind of books, and I actually have been on now I can't even remember what the forums are called, but there are forums for professional ebook formatters, and there's a couple of them that are really, really experienced and really good. And I've been sort of talking to them and listening to them, and everything that we want to do is possible, but let me put it this way. We're talking about some different things. We're talking about apples and oranges. Juto is absolutely fine for a regular novel or short story book or anything of that nature, a regular nonfiction book. But I'm going to put a link to a book that cannot be done that way. All right? It's for sale on the iTunes Store and the Google Play. And for Android devices, it has slightly less functionality on Android because of the platform, and then it is also a hardcover. So just can you see the links that I'm putting?
Yeah. I just followed it.
I'm looking at it right now.
Igor's book.
Basically, my understanding is part of it is that this one's very very graphic intensive, right? It's got a lot of pictures as part of what's causing the need for something more advanced.
It is a beautifully designed book in both versions, and in the ebook version has video, audio, spoken word, and jazz, its own jazz score. So something like that isn't going to happen in the traditional Kindle format. And I mean, you guys probably haven't seen my little war with the Amazonites, but I truly think that unless Amazon adjusts what it's doing, how it's handling it, that as soon as a year from now, they will be losing share to the tablets. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Yeah. In other words, the tablets rather than Kindle will start taking over as your main reader because I use my tablet. I just happen to have a Kindle app on it, and B, you can use the same tablet to also access a book that has music and other things that Kindle isn't supporting. Is that basically what you're saying?
Correct. Kindle doesn't even support it. Kindle does not even reliably support embedded fonts. It will embed and unembed, and I mean when you embed according to their instructions. Okay, and so this is the kind of thing that I've been that I was talking about with the experts on the. Now I can't even remember what the forums are called, but it is a it's the place where all the nerds that make ebooks hang out. If that makes any sense. And there's this one lady named Hitch, and she is so brilliant, and she really has been doing this for a long time. And I went through the whole textbook thing with her because I am someone with a background in the educational publishing industry. And if you'll notice, we can just go to Amazon right now and try to get any one of the popular textbooks, and they'll tell you that you can either borrow or download a version, but when you do so on your Kindle, it's really not usable because all it is a PDF. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So while Kindle is a godsend and a wonderful thing for the traditional novel or short story book, where it's really text and the person's just reading the text, for all the many other uses of books that there are, it is not the best right now. And like I said, I really think that they should rethink how they're approaching this. Because
they don't want to be just scooped by somebody who offers something a little more and easier to get.
Well, those devices are already here, the Microsoft Surface and the Apple, the Apple tablets, and Apple has just this hugely robust platform, And I mean, I had like Hitch. A lot of these folks are like, well, my clients only sell 5% on Apple and blah blah. You know something? If you put a good book up on Apple or Google Play, you will start selling. So
well, not only that, if you put up something interesting they can't get somewhere else, they'll get it there, because a lot of people might have Kindle and an iPod, and why are they going to go get a book on an iPod if their mystery novel reads just as well with their other books, but when they come upon something that's only on the iPod, that's where they're going to get it.
That's the way it's working right now, and for books that have special interests like Igor's book, or for other things like memoirs and things with a lot of pictures in them, or books that nonfiction books with a lot of diagrams and information. Yeah.
Also, we're talking here about golden age. Things like Igor's book is cutting edge. Right now, only a few people are doing kind of interactive books with music and links and things, but the fact that it's possible means that, particularly as younger people who are more used to this come along, sooner or later there's going to be an explosion in that field. In fact, for about 10 years, have been a little worried about this, because I'm like, well, I hope there's still a place for the traditional story, once everything becomes these multimedia books. And they haven't hit us yet, but I think they will.
I'm going to put another link. I'm sure you guys have seen it ad nauseum, but one of our friends is Joe Weichert, who is a wonderful publishing executive and sort of an expert and a guru in this stuff. And he and I got to be friends because I told him, I said, Joe, a book is not an app. An app is like book minus, right? And what we'd like to do is move toward book plus. So in other words, all the benefits we have of books right now plus. But the main barrier is the sense of place within the book. I forget what it's called. Positional awareness. You don't get that on the Kindle or any of them.
I've noticed that. What's funny about that? If they merely came out, one of the things I read books with, it's something that's on my tablet. I don't know what it's called. It's like a Google Read or something. And it has the odd, funny thing that when you try to go from one page to the next, it looks like a page flipping over. It's just a little tiny animation thing, and it always delights me. And all you would need is something like that with a little bit of a picture of pages at the side that got bigger on one side as you read more and smaller on the other side as you read more, and you would give the person that sense that they knew where they were in the book. And I bet you it would be a really easy thing to do, but nobody's done it yet. It'd be like that sense I get when I turn that page, and it makes me laugh because it feels more real than just slipping the page over like a sideways thing.
You mean like on an iPad? You mean like on the iPad that you can actually see the back of the page?
I've never looked at an iPad. I don't own one.
Oh my God. Okay.
My daughter has one, but we've never put a book on it. I just have a little Android tablet that I use. But maybe it's doing the same thing. Maybe what I'm talking about is what an iPad.
It will. Download Igor's book onto her tablet.
Onto her iPad. Hers
and
is really old iPad, so
it'll run. We've
work there. I'll try it though.
I think
Somebody
it'll work.
just gave it to her.
There's a pretty good size sample. You don't have to buy the book.
Okay, well we'll try. We'll take a look. I'll buy it if it works.
Yeah, I mean you can with a fixed format EPUB on iBooks. It doesn't have to be a huge production like Igor's book. It can just be a regular book, but as long as it's fixed format, you can turn that page and you can actually see the back side of the page just like as in a real book. But it still doesn't.
Nice.
It still doesn't give you positional awareness because where you can. What I'm saying is, when you're halfway through a book, you can see that with your eyes.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The same way the graphic does that, you could easily have someone come out with a little a program that gave you that image of the thicker and thinner pages on either side, so that you had a sense of how much of the book has gone by. And I think that's very helpful. Not only do they say people don't remember it as well, but when I've gone back. When I have a physical book and I want to look back, I was reading last year J.K. Rowling's Mystery. The Silk one?
Sure.
I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, it'll come back to me in a moment. So I got to a certain part and I wanted to go back and look up what a certain character had said because I was trying to figure out who committed the murder. And it was impossible on the Kindle to go back. And in this particular book, because of a strange, weird coincidence, I happen to have both the physical book and the Kindle, And with the physical book, I could flip through really quickly and find the spot where the person had said such and such. But I couldn't search for it because I didn't remember a particular word. I only remembered, what the scene was like, So that was when I really noticed some of the downsides of Kindle.
Right. So because you
want to look back in, particularly nonfiction things, if you want to go look back to see what you just found out,
They're different depending on the book. There's different degrees of search functionality. It'll read it to you. I mean, I find that horrendous, but a lot of other people really like that. I mean, there are all kinds of individual features. All I'm saying is, Amazon has taken a very narrow approach with its core products on the book area, and they have made a lot of money as a company off their book sales business. It isn't by any means the majority of their revenue, but it is the basis of it's their customer base. They got people in for the books, and they then sell all those other many products to them.
Yeah. Silkworm was the name of the book. Silkworm by Richard Galbraith, which is is a book I was talking about.
Is it a good one?
I really like her writing. The book is a little too. I don't care for things that are really violent or disturbing, and there's some really disturbing images in this book. But other than that, I loved it. I love her main characters. I'm really looking forward to the next one coming out. And I read very little fiction nowadays, but I make room for this series because I just really liked it. But then I'm a kind of a mystery fan anyway, so.
Oh, I love them too. Well, that's it. So, should we have other questions and stuff? I feel like we went into this technical area.
Do you guys want me to read a little more of his thing? It's not probably about as much more as I read, and then we could talk about the rest of it. I think it's gonna lead into away from the publishing side towards what the writer's side, which then the rest of you can jump in. So.
Exactly, but see, that's the whole thing. Is 99% of what I read is oriented towards selling something, and 1% is oriented toward making the thing that is sold.
Yeah.
And that's where we will all do best to put our efforts.
Yeah. So here's the rest of what he says. To put it simply, publishing had become democratized. The power differential had been still distributed down to the writers. In other words, a writer no longer needed to seek a publisher. He could become his own publisher without needing any of the cumbersome infrastructure or skills needed to distribute paper books. The old cliche of the self-published writer with a garage full of moldering hardcovers had just become obsolete. Allegedly, it was said of Samuel Colt's gun that God made some men small, some men large, but Colt made them all equal. To reinstate that for the topic of our discussion, God might have made some writers large and some writers small, but ebooks could make every writer into a publisher. The benefits to the writer are enormous. No longer is it necessary to spend years on the futile treadmill of agents and publish hunting. A brief aside, it took me 17 years to get my first book published, so I know what he's talking about. A writer is completely free to succeed or fail on his own terms. Attracting an audience for one's work, of course, is just as difficult for the self-published writer as it is for the traditionally published. But with the ability to completely control one's own work come powerful tools for marketing it. New covers, new categories, new names, giveaways, and so on. For every complaint that a traditionally published writer has about a publishing behavior, a self-published writer can fix by himself. The financial benefit is also excellent. Wringing royalties from a publisher is a legendary Sisyphean task. He's right about that. Most of the major ebook retailers pay either monthly or quarterly, and the results are usually neatly totaled in an Excel spreadsheet. That's a mind-boggling idea. Compared to the cryptic twice yearly, if that, royalty statement from a traditional publisher, the monthly sales spreadsheet of most ebook retailers are models of crystalline clarity. Boy, is he right about that.
Yeah.
The creative freedom is also splendid. In April, I had an idea for a new urban fantasy series. The old days, it would have taken years for the series to find a publisher, even if it did. In the new world of self-publishing, I released the first book in the new Cloak Games series in August, and will announce the second book in October 2nd. He writes really quickly. But with a third book planned to follow in December. For readers, the benefits are also superb. Price is one of the main ones. Why on earth should a new hardcover book cost $28? Why should a new ebook cost $13.99 or $14.99? Recently, publishers gained the ability to insist upon their own ebook prices and have raised them to protect print distribution. This seems roughly akin to Henry Ford's competitors raising the price on their cars to prohibitive levels in order to protect their horse and carriage business. Most self-published novels are priced between $2.99 and $6.99. To use myself as an example, my The Ghost series contains 15 full-length novels, all of them between 80,000 and 100,000 words. Right now, the entire series of 15 books can be purchased for $53.86. By contrast, $53.86 would buy 3 new traditionally published novels. The ebook revolution has led to a creative explosion as well. Previously, traditional publishers had considered several genres to be dead: Western, urban fantasy, military science fiction, certain romance genres, and others, and save for a few bestsellers had stopped publishing them. Now, numerous writers are working in each of these genres. Self-publishing genres saw an upswing of new books as well. For years, science fiction fantasy publishers have complained about gradually declining sales, but the self-publishing revolution has breathed new life into them. I've received emails from several people who have begun reading again after getting tired of the offering from traditional publishers, and I'm sure there are many people of similar minds out there. In other words, I think he means that they'd given up on what came out of New York, but when they found ebooks, suddenly they were interested again because they found something that connected to them. Finally, he says, the portability of ebooks cannot be overestimated as a benefit. So much of life is spent in waiting, in lines at the DMV, the waiting room at the hospital, the doctor's office, in transit on planes, in appointment rooms waiting for meetings to start. Lugging a hardcover book or even a mass market paperback to all these places is impractical. But as smartphones grow more ubiquitous, nearly everybody carries a phone at all times, and it's trivial to install an e-reader application on a smartphone. Most even come with bundled e-reader applications. How splendid it is to have an entire library at one's fingertips to fill the otherwise wasted hours of waiting in line in waiting rooms. I have read novels on my phone while waiting for relatives to emerge from doctor's offices, and as before, I very much doubt I am the only one. To sum up, it is indeed a golden age of publishing, and there has never been a better time to be a writer or a reader. So that is Jonathan Molnar's report, and I guess we can talk about it, and then we can talk about whether there's anything he's missed. So what do you guys think?
I think he's dead on. You know, my wife and I were on vacation probably about a month ago or so, and it was right around when the new Star Wars novel was coming out. And I haven't read a Star Wars novel since The Phantom Menace came out, but with this being the new canon, I was really excited for it. And we were nowhere by any sort of bookstore, but I found Wi-Fi in the store we were in, and I holed up in their snack bar and downloaded the new novel and started reading it. So I think that accessibility is just an absolutely fantastic feature of what's going on right now.
I mentioned that I'd had 2 copies of Silkworm, and it was because I bought one. I put it aside to read on vacation. I, had it in a very obvious place and waited for it eagerly for 2 weeks, and I got on vacation and realized it was still in that place. So I was able to download it at a McDonald's on my Kindle app, on my tablet on my way to vacation, and it was really convenient. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to read it.
Yeah.
What I've totally noticed on my attempts thus far to break in with novels is the extremely slow response time for the major publishers. Talking 9 to 12 months with most of the ones I'm dealing with. Yeah.
It could sometimes be never.
Yeah, sometimes never. I submitted my novel to Tor in 2001, and they bought it in 2007.
Wow.
I submitted my novel to Tor in 2002, and I have yet to get a rejection. So,
Oh my God, are you serious, Jeff?
Did you send them
That
a
happened
reletter or
often.
something?
That
Just to
happened to
see?
friends of mine too. I'd have them send stuff to my editors and stuff, and they never responded.
They never would respond.
don't get me started about Mr. Hayden, but the key for me, and I'm 63 years old, is I don't have a lot of 17 years left.
Yeah.
Right.
If I write a novel, I am not going to waste 5 years to find out if actually someone will be willing to publish it. I just won't. And the book will succeed or fail on its own merits. If it fails, well, that's bad on me. I learned something. But I didn't have to wait 5 years for that lesson.
Amen.
And to me, as a writer, this is the big deal in self-publishing of ebooks. And I have 20 conventionally paper-published books, though most of them are technical books. And the process is long and arduous. And, of course, I was a young man when I did a lot of that stuff. I'm not young anymore, and I'm impatient. I want to get books out and in front of the readership without having to sit and wait on someone else for 3 years, 5 years, or in Tor's case, forever, before I see those results. And to me, as a writer, that is the biggest single win of the self-publishing ebook revolution. And it's right damned now.
I will say something for the other side. And I really don't think when I say this that I'm saying it shouldn't be the way it is now. But the one advantage for me of that 17-year wait was I rewrote the book 6 times. And the finished book was good, but the first one I originally submitted wasn't. Now, I wrote it while I was waiting. I would just keep rewriting it and then send them the updated version.
Now that I've been working with you, I can totally understand that.
Yeah, you've seen me do that too. It is unfortunately, something that happens because I just can't keep fixing it.
You know what,
but in this case, a year would go by or 2 years between versions, and I'd be like, okay, well, they haven't answered yet. I'm going to do more. And I do think that my skill increased a lot more. If I had been starting now and I had gotten frustrated and just put the thing out on Amazon, I don't think I would be as good a writer now. But I think to counter my own point, if I had put it out on Amazon and it had done badly and then I'd written another 6 different books during those same years and put them out, I'd probably be just as good a writer after that period was up.
Exactly. You'd be doing the work, but I think you would be, I would venture to say, a little bit better because you would be interacting with readers, and that's what the traditional system prohibits as it stands. I mean, all you're doing, you don't even know if an editor is reading your book when you submit it, much less,
Yeah, well, I mean, I interacted anyway. I had dozens of people read and get back to me privately, so that was one thing that helped, but that took a certain amount of effort, and I didn't get any money for that. In the current system, I could have put it up on Amazon, interacted with some readers, they would have at least paid me $1,
Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, what I think is interesting is when at first I was thinking, well, I'm glad it happened the way it did for me because I think I worked really hard during that period. But when I look back, I think, well, I wrote some books I threw out. If I'd written those books and put them for sale and anybody had liked them, I would have got a few dollars for all that effort, and I still would have learned everything I learned, and my next book still would have been better either way. So I think I think there's some disadvantages in your early writing. If a person puts something out and it doesn't do well and they give up, that could be a disadvantage. But how is that different than if they send it to Tor and they never answer and they give up? So it seems to me the disadvantages are equal and the advantages are dramatic.
At least what I understand from talking to writers, and now that I sort of do this a bit, if they submit stuff and they never hear back and they get all discouraged and give up, they probably weren't a writer in the first place.
Oh, without question.
Yeah. By the way, if anyone
No, I absolutely have to disagree on that.
Okay.
And I know most of you don't really know me that well, except for Jaji. I've published 28 books now, and I'm actually working on number 29. And I am one of the co-founders of BookView Cafe, and I'm the current treasurer, and I'm the former treasurer of SFWA. And I served with 3 presidents. I served with Russell Davis. No, only 2. John and Russell were the 2 presidents I served with. And I'm really not primarily a science fiction writer. I'm actually primarily a nonfiction writer. I've worked for a lot of educational publishers, and I've published literally thousands of articles. So I absolutely disagree that this system that's being described is in any way productive for anyone. I think it's completely aproductive.
You brought up something that I think is really cool that I wonder if you could talk to, and that is one of the big problems with being a self-publisher, for instance, is that you can't get into libraries. Libraries can't. They're overworked already. They can't afford to deal with individuals. But BookView Cafe got around that by being just a group of writers that got together. Could you tell us about it, Amy? I really think it's a delightful thing, and I don't know if everybody knows about it.
Well, BookView Cafe is the largest author publishing cooperative, and it's the oldest, and it's the most successful. I mean, it did start out as an outgrowth of, we had a mailing list for many years of female science fiction and fantasy writers, and everyone experienced problems in the traditional publishing system, and the stories were the same over and over. It didn't matter who it was, and if I tell you, 2 of our members were Anne McCaffrey and Ursula Le Guin. Okay, and they were having the same experiences as every single other person, including down to skanky people like me. So, so I said, why are we sitting around taking this when we can do something about it? And we did. And we did start out publishing ebooks only. Now we're doing print books and ebooks. And we have a member, Chris Dolly, who was one of our first male joint members. He's an expat Brit who lives in a little farmhouse in France. He's a wonderful, wonderful, hilarious writer. He was our first New York Times bestseller writer out of BookView Cafe with a memoir that he wrote. Chris is our library representative, and he's also the library representative for Chameleon, and subwrites in a certain way.
I've talked to some of the authors, and what I'd heard was the library sales were really good for BookView Cafe.
Yes,
because you were a group, you could represent yourself to libraries in a way that individuals couldn't. So it seems to me that not only does that recommend BookView Cafe itself, but it suggests that some of the problems that individual authors have that publishers would take care of, they could solve by banding together into groups.
Exactly, or they could work with a new publisher like Chameleon, which is not taking which treats them like a valued and trusted business partner as opposed to a replaceable widget. Because they're not even treating the bestsellers well.
Yeah.
They are making book off the top best-selling authors' work, and it is not a sustainable. No, it's not. It's not sustainable at all, and it's really sad because they let go of so many capable people. I mean, editing is important. Editing is important, and that's why we really want to do the new model because you do not. This is not done well in isolation, and it's not. Why would it stand to reason that an author would be a wonderful writer of fiction, and they're also a great cover designer, and they're also a great editor, and they're also a great marketer, and a great social media person? Those skills do not have to exist in the same person, nor are they best done as hired out to a contract help. They were best.
That's similar to what Jonathan Molnar had told me when he said, that he hadn't realized at first that his business experience made being an independent writer much easier for him than many people. He said they just couldn't handle basically what we'll call, though it isn't paper, the paperwork side of
exactly
various places, following the money, paying the taxes, and the other things like that.
I mean, what he's not addressing in this is that each one of these vendors pays on it. They may pay monthly, but they don't pay on the same day. Their statements are not the same. They're not consolidated. Even with only a few books, I've got a huge accounting task at hand.
Yeah.
As soon as we get bigger, I've got someone to hire.
I mean, I was, agreeing with his comments about royalty statements, and I've often read them and thought this could be so much clearer if they put it slightly differently. But it is true that, of course, they have, many different versions. Some sold on sale, some sold under different tax laws. And, they do end up with a lot of information that they have to put across, which is why it became complicated to begin with. So I think it could be a lot clearer, but I'm saying that one of the reasons it's kind of complicated is that it as you said, there's a lot of different things coming in that it's hard for an individual to handle if they have no experience with them.
Not just that. I mean, Jaji, do you want to do every single thing? Would you like to do your own advertising plan? How about send your own books to all the reviewers?
I think one reason I wrote you was because I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. I'm not good at that part of it, And that was why, because several people have really told me about the joys of being entirely independent. And as I do part of these things, I was like, well, being independent is only this much more than what I'm doing, and yet that this much was all things that are not my expertise. And that's why, as a writer, I look around and I go, it's great that we can do things independently, but things like Chameleon or things like Bookview Cafe and some of these other avenues are necessary for some of us who might be good writers but not necessarily good accountants or, good
They're necessary in general because I mean, even as you know, I haven't been all that well over the summer, but I keep an eye on everything related to the business. And all the things that I do as a business consultant, that sort of feeds into it. I believe that this little golden window that the individual authors who are, it's done very well for a lot of people. The golden window is closing, all right? And I would venture to say as soon as a year or two from now, it will be back to the established publishers and any such alternatives as can work within that system. And that includes paid advertising, that includes paid marketing and placement, and so on.
I noticed that even now, some of the very, you hear these stories and they say things like, I guess most of you probably know the story of the book Wool, where the guy started out, he's sending it out, and you hear it as if, oh my gosh, this guy came out of nowhere. But then when you actually read what he did a lot of marketing style work. He wrote to book reviewers at a time when not everyone in the universe was doing this. I mean, he hit a lot of what you call golden windows, some of which have already closed.
He has closed those because he was paying people to review his book. And he was paying people to buy his book to goose the Amazon rankings. And
but so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Well, I have a friend who's an excellent, doing really well, independent, but someone involved with what he's doing is a marketing expert. And so it's like Jonathan Miller being a business guy. Some of the people who are successful on their own, they have skills like the skills Amy has. And when we who don't have those skills look around, we don't realize that there are additional things out there that we're missing. It's not to say we might not be able to do it, but it does say that it takes considerably more non-writing work. And John and I often talk about this. We say, okay, we could learn to do X. Because we had a long talk at one point about whether, like when I first did the Rachel Griffin books, and I didn't know what to do with them. I gave them to my agent, and my agent said to me, I just shopped around a series about a superhero school, but every major publisher already has their own magic school series, and no one will look at it. He wouldn't even show it to anybody. He just said no one will look at it. He sent it to Amazon. Eventually, I took it back. I said I don't feel comfortable about that. So we talked for a while about whether I should go independent with it, and both of us were like, well, it's going to take X amount of time to learn to do these things, like marketing or whatever it was, and that's time we're not writing. And if we can get somebody else who's good at them to do them and split the money, which is the kind of thing that it's what we're talking about here, we can do what we've spent all this time. In the 17 years I spent teaching myself how to write, I didn't spend learning marketing. So I think that on one hand there's all this opportunity. On the other hand, learning how to make use of the opportunity, when to band together, when to use a publisher, when to go off on our own, I think is kind of a treacherous land that we all have to move forward across with care. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And I was briefly considering going independent with my work, and fortunately Vox noticed me through Jason. But that's one of the concerns that I had is, if I were doing the cover art for my book, it would be a stick figure with a stick gun and a stick hat on his head. That is not my forte. I'm a science fiction writer and a theology guy. I don't do marketing. And, I'm okay with my grammar and my punctuation, but I'm not an editor. I'm not capable of calling myself on my own stupid ideas, so.
Yeah. The one thing I will point out and interject here is these days authors still have to really know as much marketing and do as much of their own self-promotion if they're with a traditional publisher as if they're indie. I mean, from stories I've heard from traditionally published authors. Okay, yeah, you're backing me up. So it's really, like you were saying, it's inescapable.
When we started, it kind of wasn't. The rule when we started was nobody bought advertising for books because they never saw any change in the price when they did. That books were just being sold by word of mouth. So there wasn't that much that they told writers to do. But then once the internet opened up and the whole situation changed, suddenly there's a lot for us to do. At one point we were told to blog, that blog was the thing that sold books, and now they're finding there's so many blogs. That was true when there were like 10 blogs.
Yeah,
now there's many blogs that apparently blogging, unless you're Larry Correia, blogging doesn't sell books.
No, to be honest,
I routinely sell other people's books, but a lot of times you appear on a blog, it makes no difference of any kind. So, and I was actually kind of pleased when I realized this, because I thought, well, I'd been being asked to go and do all these things, every time the publisher would send me a list of things at Tor. They'd send me this list, and they'd say, go to these sites, and when you went to the sites and researched it, you found out that every single advice said, you only succeed if you spend time on the site and get to know people. And I looked at these 5, 10 sites, and I went, if I go do what they're telling me to do, I will never write another book. All I will do is spend my life on social media.
Exactly.
So I'm kind of happy that there's less effect from blogging now, because it means I can concentrate on writing again.
Well, to be honest, the only writers' blogs I go to are the writers who I like. I've never read someone's blog and then bought a book from them. So I think it works backwards.
Yeah. It works. Exactly, it works backwards, and it has. There's no relationship. I mean, when we started 2 years ago, we worked with Peter Hildick Smith, who has Codex Group, and you will sometimes read him quoted in some of the industry information and publications. And he is very, very sophisticated marketing executive who worked for Del Rey for quite some time, and then went to Quaker and launched their natural products division. And so the writer that has the most brand loyalty is Lee Child. And Lee Child has not been on the internet since 1996. So, yeah, it really, there is no correlation between this. And I truly think there are two things. I myself have made a commitment. I am no longer going to forward any information from anyone who is not of direct business benefit to our company. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that means that there's no more this, like, I think we started the conversation out with the people service. That's not real. It's totally fake. Yelp for people. All of the same people that were involved in the Hugo controversy were heavily involved in the people thing. I wrote you a note about the Stonewall movie, and from the perspective only that this highly successful director ruined his movie and his finances and his audience by making a poor creative choice that could be observed in the past to be a poor one. And he made a poor creative choice. That was the point of my note. Not, yay, Stonewall, But I'm not forwarding any of that stuff anymore. I'm done with it. And I advise everyone I talk to do the same thing. And I think we'll see a different picture, because really it's about what's in the book. It is not about the blog. It's not even, the cover should admirably reflect the book, but it's not about the cover. I mean, what's one of our oldest sayings? Don't judge a book by its cover.
People do that.
Though I will say my tour experience showed that if you get a good cover that has nothing to do with your book, it is a problem.
It's not gonna help.
Of course it is. The cover should...
And even a good friend of mine said, it took me a moment when I started your book because it was so different from the cover. It wasn't what I expected, So unless, covers have a point, but it's true that the best cover in the world without a good story isn't going to do you any good.
It's worth nothing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look into how Lee Child achieved his branding success, Lee Child is like Oreos. If you buy a package of Oreos, you know what you're going to get. So he's prolific. He's stuck with one series, one product, and he's consistent. So
it's funny? I've never heard of him until this conversation.
Oh my Lord, Jack Reacher.
There are a lot of authors out there like, Danielle Steele or Stephen King or James Patterson who are big name authors who I know, but for some reason I had missed this guy. Isn't that funny?
All right. Our original business model was making books like Oreos, treating writers like Henry Ford. We've changed that now because we've looked at other successful startups, and we want to move. We want to be successful. We want to be very successful. Okay. If we achieve what we want, we are going to be the biggest privately held publisher on the West Coast, and I think that is what we want to do. I mean,
I of course am completely rooting for you. Really want you guys to.
Honey, I've told you, you are normal author number one. Okay, you're normal author number one, and that's what when I say that, I mean Igor is insane. Okay, he's one of our partners.
Yeah. Well, but I'm not looking for something like Igor is a really cool thing, and you're doing something cutting edge. But I'm looking for doing something reaching. I'll tell you, it's funny. My market actually isn't reading yet. So I'm looking to stay alive as a writer until it wakes up, which is all the families I know who all the young religious families I know who have 6 and 8 children.
Yes.
But they're all on the geeky side. Their kids aren't reading yet, but when they do, books like mine are going to be what they're looking for.
Exactly.
So I'm trying to get my books out there before they grow up to reading age.
That's what we're doing. What I was wanting to say with Brian is Oreos were our first inspiration.
Not so much fun.
Okay.
Brian's a really funny guy.
Yeah.
Really hungry guy.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, they're always good. But see, that's the thing is, we have to pay attention to the writer who is the only person who can make the thing that gets sold. And so we have to help them do the best job they can do, and help them reach. It shouldn't really be the writer's job to reach their audience. It should be the publisher's job and the retailer's job to put the product in front of the people, like you said, Jaji, the young families who have some religious
kids who are going to be that's what they're going to want to read, you know?
Yeah, you're going to hear me say really liberal stuff, friends. You will hear me say that because I do not judge people, but you should know that I am very religious. I always have been. And that faith is extremely important to me, and that's why I support you. Because it is a critical part of our life, and it's completely ignored for the most part. Except Christian publishers do great.
Yeah, and what I'm writing does not at all go for a Christian publisher. It's meant for a mainstream audience, but the people who are in November, we're going to the second, it's actually the third, but it's the second on the East Coast, Doxicon, which is where faith meets science fiction convention run by the Orthodox Church.
Oh, are you serious? I love that.
There's one in Seattle and there's one out here. And that audience is an audience that's growing that I think is, the regular readers, my stuff should appeal to them, but those guys, it would appeal more. So it's not like I'm writing a Christian book only Christians are going to enjoy. And going back from that to step back, one of the main things I see, which I think Amy is one of the people who's speaking to, is one of the current problems we have with this proliferation of books is it's hard to find, as a reader, it's hard to find what you like. And having marketers come up with clever ways of presenting things so that you can find them is a great idea, because I think one of the things that writers need at the moment is more avenues to find the books among the millions of books out there that happen to be the books you like, whether it's books of, fantasy and faith, or whether it's books about, dolphins on the moon, or whatever it is you're looking for. I don't think we have enough mechanisms right now. Like, let's give you an example. So I have a Kindle. I get to the end of the book. It pops up with other books on the subject, which is nice. I can look at them, and occasionally I buy them if it's like a nonfiction subject I'm researching or something.
Right.
But there's no real way for me to tell which ones are good, because while Amazon ratings kind of tells you that, they also kind of don't. A lot of them are faked. I wish there were more, like, I don't know, independent rating. I wish there were just more avenues for me to look and see, okay, this book actually has, been around a while, or this book actually has the support of someone who knows something about that subject, or, other things like that. I just feel like there's that's an open area that nobody's gotten into much yet that is waiting to be mined.
It's the huge thing. All I can say is that our thought is that it starts with the product itself, with the book itself. And then that is, what is this book? What is its essential nature? And in our 6 key elements, okay, which are not the 6 non-key elements that are done by the trajectory business. I don't know if you guys have heard about them, but they're out there actively soliciting writers and publishers to join their service, which here, I put the link when we first came, Trajectory. They're trying to do this, and they're doing it all wrong, okay? Trajectory.com. Let's see if that'll work. But yeah, it'll work. Right now it's working on keywords. Just to let you all know.
Yeah, and keywords are not always really the right keywords or the right things.
I know, it's very crude. And it beats these guys, okay? Because I'm going to put their link. All you have to do is go look down at Apple category, and you'll see the problem with their system. Okay?
Yeah. I mean, I know looking for things on Amazon, I'm never happy with the way it works out. Hey, Brian, I can see on the side here that everybody's eager to hear your experience, so why don't you take over? Amy and I'll take a breath.
Yeah. Thank you.
I want to thank you and Amy and Jeff for giving us an inside look at publishing. It's very interesting, especially from an outsider perspective. But continuing with that perspective, so, okay, my publishing journey began over 10 years ago now, when I didn't start writing my current book, Ethereal. I actually started writing the sequel, Soul Dancer. So I don't know if anyone else has done this. I've never heard of it. I started writing book 2 in a planned 4-book series first, because it was a story I really wanted to tell. And it originally came in as a 300,000-word monster that sucked. I mean, it was the first book I'd ever written, and you've heard the maxim that first books are always horrible. I can vouch for this. Well, anyway, after rewriting it once or twice, I figured, well, I need to go back and fill in some background because I'd started this outline document to fill in all the gaps and do world building, which turned into the first novel. So it was originally going to be 3. My working outline document turned into a prequel, which became the first book material. So I wrote a draft of that, the first version of which also sucked, although slightly less than the first book. Redrafted again.
You know,
got some
all
things
this
to be
time
read.
I've pronounced it netherreal.
We were discussing that before we got here. If you look at the top of the chat, I've got it phonetically.
That's really cool. No, I'm glad to know that.
No, that's okay. It's a portmanteau of the 2 main settings, so it's Netherworld
Yeah.
plus Ether.
No, I kind of got that, but your pronunciation is much cooler.
Oh, thank you. I like the way Jason pronounces it.
What?
I like the
just
way
said-
Jason pronounces everything.
Yeah.
Agreed. So anyway,
It's just because
So
I don't have an accent.
And we all do.
Yeah, you all have accents. I don't have an accent.
yeah, it's
It's so charmingly. Go ahead, Brian.
yeah that my Midwest accent is often been called the anti-accent, or like the newsreader's accent, but
Yeah.
I digress. Anyway, so I have these 2 manuscripts sitting around, and I started researching publishing, and this was probably around 2005 when I got started. Back then, ebooks weren't even really a glint in anybody's eye, so I got on the submission carousel and started making submissions and sending query letters to agents and editors and publishers, and of course just getting nowhere. But I figured, okay, I need to dig in here. This could take years, if not decades. So I just put my nose to the grindstone, kept revising, wrote some short stories. Nothing any of us hasn't done. Nothing exceptional, really. But I started branching out and thinking, okay, perhaps I need to adjust my thinking, because I'm one of those guys who is blessed with the ability, what Aristotle called the ability to be swayed by data. So I thought perhaps my data set is flawed, or there are gaps in my thinking somehow. So I started looking at the other side, because I'd heard about Amazon and the Kindle and people self-publishing. And even I still bought into the stigma, these are washouts who couldn't make it, or they're on the make for a fast buck, and they're just going to put up a raw MS Word file manuscript with, like Josh said, some stick figures, and just try to skim off the 99-cent bin. But the more I looked into it and attended panels, read websites of guys like Hugh Howey, who wrote Wool, and Joe Conrath, David Goffrin, folks like that, on their journey, and here I was seeing, in some cases, these folks who had been traditionally published, like in Conrad's case, got no support from their publishers, worked their butts off to earn out their advances, and then just got cut, got thrown away like used Kleenex. Then went indie and finally started making a living without having to do all the legwork and all the marketing and advertising. So I thought, okay, so this might be viable. Well, then I started reading the author earnings reports, and that's what really turned me around, because there was hard data, collected by data gathering experts, showing that not only was indie publishing and small press publishing competitive, we were eating the traditional publishers' lunches. We were kicking their asses.
That's not true, Brian. Honestly, I don't want to dispute. What has happened is several hundred, if not more than 1,000 people have now become able to earn a living by independently publishing, and that is absolutely true. Okay, 100% true. But as far as this whole Amazon Kindle focus, it is probably no more than 11% of the total book publishing business. So we really have to recognize that. Okay?
The recent numbers that just came out was about 5,000 to 6,000 people who were, in And it said this isn't everybody, because some people don't get up into the high numbers in Amazon. But on the other hand, that's 5,000 to 6,000 people that are succeeding without having to go through New York.
No, it's not. It actually isn't. I don't want to dispute that, but I want people to understand that if you're going to bring up things like data-driven and business, then you need to look at the things that I will write or other people who actually know, who are actual business analysts. Okay, and Mr. Howie is not that.
Well,
All right?
it's not Hugh Howey doing it. Hugh Howey did hire professional business
Okay.
analysts. He's worked for
You know what? Our CTO is the person who developed the original Amazon Kindle build, and he's going back to work at doing what he loves to do. But Bruce, my partner, is a Fortune 100 continuous improvement expert, and I've helped over 150 businesses get off the ground and grow in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico over the past 5 years. And so all I'm telling you is it's deceptive in the sense that this is such a small portion of the total amount of business. That is what I'm saying.
I think that all of us know there are guys out there who only make $100 in the whole life of their book.
Kindle ebooks is such a small portion of the business. It is not the majority of the books sold. Walmart sells more books than Amazon. All right?
Well, that's fine. And that's something different than what I'm talking about. And that's a conversation we can have. I'm always open for new data. I would love to read what you've written and discuss this with you. What I'm specifically talking about is the declining market share in ebooks of the big 5 publishers, whose share has flipped from 60% last year to 40% now. And Amazon, small press, and indie publishers are now the 60%. So it's an exact mirror image of what it was.
Of this small portion of the total book publishing market. Yes, that's true.
That's all I'm saying.
Can I just jump in? Sorry, I was going to say, Amy, when you say total book publishing market, does that include stuff like university textbooks and all the rest of it?
It's trade publishing. Yeah, it does.
Okay. Oh, well, I mean, I don't know.
Trade publishing
does not include textbooks. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, exactly. Trade publishing doesn't. It kind of does. There's some overlap, but it includes everything that's not sold in a university bookstore or a college bookstore. Yeah. So, no, it's a pretty big. One of the problems with the industry is that reliable information is very difficult to come by, and the author earning report has made the case that the Amazon sales, which are not transparent to anyone, are not accounted for if you look at official business reports. If you look at Hoover's or something like that.
It goes both ways. The Amazon sales aren't showing up on the trade reports and on the paper reports. Paper sales aren't showing up, So it goes both ways.
Don't show up. And AC Nielsen BookScan system is like a point of sale system that goes back a long, long way, and it hasn't been upgraded or updated, and so what Nielsen BookScan spits out is not so hot. All right.
Yeah. Well, BookScan doesn't include ebooks at all. And I've had people come to me and say, "Oh, I'd like to see your Nielsen's BookScan numbers," and I'm like, "Okay, but I think I've sold 14, hardcover books in this last period. Well, that has, I've bought X number of Kindle, and there was they weren't telling you anything. It was just like a smokescreen."
Yeah, and something, if somebody comes to you and asks you that, just say what for, Yeah,
I just said it. Don't do any good. No good.
All right. So,
anyway.
So our position is, and what I said about Walmart is important. 20% of people regularly buy and read books, and they include this whole group here that we're talking, okay? But 100% of people, and this is true worldwide, can read. So ask yourself the question, why aren't more people regularly buying and reading books? And if you go and talk to people, they'll have 3 answers. 1, I just don't have the time to read. 2, they'll tell you, oh, I try to read a book, but I don't like it. All right? It's not working for them. And
Well, can
And
we get
three,
into that one? Can I finish my story and then we can
Oh yeah.
get
I'm
into
just
it?
telling you, I'm 5
Yeah.
to 10 years ahead of you. Is all I'm trying to say.
Hey,
Okay.
excellent summation. Well, I'll tell you what is the third reason?
The third what?
The third reason people don't read. That's actually very interesting.
Amy? Amy?
Oh, I think she dropped out.
Maybe she stepped away to see that something. Brian, why don't you continue? We'll ask her when she comes back.
Sure. Okay. But anyway, so based not just on the sales data, that's actually a small part of it. It was also something that Jeff has spoken about before, which was just the owner's terms in a lot of the traditional publishing contracts, like non-competes, right of first submission, right of first refusal, sort of creating this infinitely repeating perpetual indenture loop.
Yeah.
And just me asking myself, do I want to give up 85% of the proceeds from my work in exchange for what a traditional publisher offers, when what they offer, I think we can all agree, has been diminishing in terms of marketing support, in terms of co-op. I mean, some people still do get the golden ticket magic carpet ride, but that's the 1% of the 1%. So I figured I might as well try this, because every day that my book is not available for readers is a day that I'm not earning anything from it. So I started investigating, okay, what's it going to take for me to go live with this thing? And thanks to help from a lot of you folks, especially Jason and Jaji, I was actually able to produce what I think is a pretty slick, high quality product here within very reasonable monetary terms. So I put the book out in June, and yeah, I'm satisfied with the level of success. I mean, success is largely subjective. One thing I've learned is everyone needs to define the level of success he's going for on his own, and I've met mine. I mean, in terms of when you're talking about how much the average self-published author earns in a year, I was able to do that in 2 months. So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at now. I'll go ahead and cede the floor.
That's really cool. And I
it's
should
great.
tell you guys, I just got to read his sequel, and I really enjoyed it. Amy, I think you stepped away for a second, but we all wanted to hear what the third reason people didn't read was.
Yeah.
Oh, they're not being presented books that interest them in market channels to which they would respond. So, I mean, this includes whomever. It includes the young families that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so the Kindle is one market channel. And that's why I think that there's been so much attention paid to it, is because it enabled material that the readers who use that channel would respond to. So that's what's going on with all these things that we've been discussing, including your work, Brian. Your work is a great fit for people who are on that using the Kindle and able to respond to you. So that pretty much leaves a lot of other people, and I'm not really sure what the pool or customer mix is with the Kindle, but I can say it's older, and I can say that it skews heavily female, although the science fiction and fantasy is doing well on it for the simple reason that the supply wasn't meeting the audience needs through the more traditional channels before the Kindle enabled what's been going on. And that's true in a few other genres as well. And so yeah, I mean, but what we're talking about is it's a whole bigger world out there, and the truth is that younger people don't like the ebooks; they like paper books. So.
Well, I mean,
Well, thanks.
we certainly
That's
don't
good
have
to
anything.
have.
We don't have anything e-wise at the moment that deals with, for instance, almost any kind of picture books, whether it's kids' picture books or the kind you'd put out on your coffee table. So there's definitely huge gaps. But I think the place where Kindle and things like that, Nook and other things like that, are doing well is, I remember some years ago when suddenly there were all these conservative radio talk hosts, and there hadn't been before. And it was because, like, TV catered to a certain group, and then radio found a niche of other people who were not getting it from the TV, and suddenly you had one group. So I think part of what's going on with Kindle is that there's traditional publishing, because they had been selective in a certain way.
No, they don't, because they don't communicate with readers.
Right.
They
well, I mean,
communicate very poorly with readers.
Look at Jonathan Molner's example of Westerns.
Mm-hmm.
Westerns seeming to disappear. But if there's still people out there writing Westerns, I mean, and I think Amy's right. I've noticed for years, I remember I wrote a story. It was actually a short story that was the original story that led to me writing the Prospero books. And I put it aside, and at one point I rewrote it years later because the original story had not really had that much to do with where it went later. My characters were a bit different. So I rewrote it and gave it a new polish, and it now kind of fit the background of my series, and I sent it off to Magazine of Science Fiction and Fantasy. And it got rejected because the editor didn't like stories with elves. And it didn't have any elves in it. It was about Miranda, the daughter of Prospero, living in the modern world, trying to solve a problem which vampires were putting something
that sounds
into
like
soda, and the soda was making the person taste better to the vampire. Okay, I mean, and there happened to be a sidekick. And I kept thinking, this editor might be tired of reading stories about elves, of which there really aren't any in my story. But
it was somebody else's rejection.
Supposed to be selling stories to fantasy readers who like elves? And I noticed at that point that editors get tired of fads way before readers get tired of fads. And they read so much of something, they decide nobody really wants this anymore, we don't want to publish it. And they don't go, oh, wait, maybe I need to look for a slightly better quality of writer. I've been publishing too much of it. They just go, let's publish something else. Well, all those readers out there who still want to read elves are left going, well, I'd really like to read a book about an elf, but there's none on the shelves,
Perfect personal example. And the story you described sounds like a perfect FNSF story. So
it was funny, and and it wasn't. Sooner or later, I'll do something with it.
Yeah,
it's still sitting around somewhere.
I mean, it's I mean, that's what it is. But I mean, it's because the business is out of whack, and on an individual book or title level, the stakes are so small financially that this is how this thing has gotten going this way. And I think the business was designed for a past in which only a few people read. It was also designed for a past in which reading was considered to be a nerdy activity, or perhaps not a very socially, people kind of got, at least in America, reading was sort of put down, I mean, like, bookworm, you would get teased, I mean, and so on. And, there's courses right now that are teaching people how can you read a book a day. And so, no, it's out there, and it's the established publishing group. I mean, I'm not saying these things disputing the author earnings report, because I am in favor of the traditional publishing approach, and they're flailing around and looking for any solution that they can find to their business dilemma, and they have a very real dilemma. I'm just saying it's a bigger world than that. It's a very big world.
I'm personally expecting that we'll see in the future the video game and the book getting closer and closer together, and that's a little bit of what you have I mean, you're not nearly at that level but with Igor, just that more and more closer together of interactive stories, so that video games will be a little bit more like books, and books will be a little bit more,
there's room for
interactive or multimedia,
There's room for everything, but I mean, when we talk about this, we took on a really basic level, just like what you said, Faji. People would be interested in reading more stories about elves, but somebody decided they should.
Somebody decided they didn't want it. Yeah, exactly.
I'm tired of that, and I'm not going to do it anymore. And that's just sort of anti-business, anti-customer, right? Like, I'm tired of serving these people lattes, so I'm going to change them all to what macchiatos. That's exactly what we're talking about.
One of the first publishing panels I ever went to at a convention the editors were talking about books, and one of the stories they told was that they had, in 1 month, received 3 books about veterinarians in Fairyland. 3 different books by 3 different people. They happen to arrive at the same time. Editors have these happen to them where there just seem to be things that were like fads that happened before, and they don't know what caused it, you know. And they said, well, they could only buy 1 because they couldn't put out 3 different books. So the guy, you know, the good one, whatever the best one that came in first was the one that won, and the other 2 didn't. But there's no there's no reason to think that readers might not like 3 books on this subject, particularly if they like the first one, you know. And in the new models with more options, those other 2 authors are not stuck doing nothing just because there's only 2 places they could send their book, and they happen to be beat out by someone else who wrote the same idea with a completely different story.
Exactly. The biggest problem is the adversarial, negative relationship. I mean, Brian mentioned the indentured servant concept, okay? I mean, at the least, it should be a partnership, and it should be based, that's why Chameleon is 1099 contracts, all right? It's a business relationship. It is not, work in it. That's why we also oppose work for hire. It is inherently exploitive. Mm-hmm. So, it's like and it's also from a work perspective or a quality perspective. What kind of quality are you going to get over time? You're not. You have no facility to improve. So, yeah, don't get me started.
You know, it's very interesting you said that. I signed a contract with Castalia House pretty much a year ago to the day now, and I work full time. I'm married. I'm in seminary, and I'm writing a novel, like in the shreds of spare time I have. And when I didn't make my initial deadline, I had to call Vox, and I was like, this is where I'm at. I'm also in the middle of finals right now, and I was expecting quite a bit more drama. He's like, I'd rather you get me a good novel than you try to cram it in.
Right. Sure. So, I mean, that's the best answer. That's the way it should be. Because it shouldn't. This all happened to me because I crossed this boundary. And in April, I was at the Writers of the Future event, and I sat there and I thought, I have actually crossed this huge thing because I'm not a writer anymore. I'm a publisher. And I thought, I just thought, I'm looking at this as a business person, not as an individual writer thinking, oh, I wish my book was published. Oh, I got rejected that time. Oh, they did me wrong. They never put any advertisement into it or whatever it was. And I'm failed to be recognized for my incredible genius. And I crossed this boundary and I started looking at all the things that could be improved about the process, from these simple human level relationship things to actual business efficiencies that do not exist, such as the royalty statements Jaji is talking about. We just completed doing one of the bundles with Story Bundle, and they update you in real time on what is selling and what is earning, and then they pay you immediately. Now, how the hell can you beat that? All right, Amazon is So that's what we'd be looking to move toward. We really, really would be looking to move toward a system of payment as often as possible, and looking toward ongoing development and growth for everyone concerned. So that's really what we're looking at.
Is it possible to move the discussion just a little bit toward the retail channel? Because
yeah, go ahead. I'll be back.
Go ahead.
Is that an ugly topic here?
No, anything is fair game.
Okay. First of all, let's see. I've been piling up this notepad in the back of my head of points that have been made and what response might be made, but there are a couple things to be said about retail, where the reader actually buys the goods. We've lost an enormous amount of shelf space for paper books in the last 10 years. Borders went away, it was almost half.
Yeah.
We're losing other stores right and left.
We've lost a lot of space out of Barnes and Nobles that
yes,
are not being
yeah,
used for books.
we have. It's now Lego sets and Moleskines and things like that, which makes me wonder to what extent the print book business has a retail future on Main Street or bricks and mortar, whatever you want to call it. And the big six, the people who define publishing, their future is unbreakably welded to the future of Main Street or bricks and mortar print book retailing. They are not doing anything that I've seen to position themselves for a future online with ebooks. It's like, yes, they're selling ebooks, but they're not selling them direct. They could be. They're selling them through Amazon. Amazon may not have the whole business, but they're, in my experience and in the experience of people I've talked to, Amazon has done an order of magnitude better for self-published writers than the Nook store. And that's certainly been my experience.
In fact,
I call them Nook never sells a book. Yeah.
Yes, and
Jonathan Molnar he goes through all of them, Smashword and iTunes, and he had his numbers up, and Amazon either here or overseas were like, in the 45%, and nearly everything else was like, 5%, 2%, things like this.
So there's a channel capture effect that Amazon has worked very much to their advantage. A lot of things online tend to drift toward early adopters who do things reasonably well, and that was Amazon. They have cash flow advantages in that they sell disposable diapers and ladders and gun safes and everything else in the universe. They don't have the problems that bricks and mortar retail stores have, trying to portion out a valuable square footage to products that will turn them a profit. And I've heard that Smashwords, I've never tried them. I've heard they don't work very well compared to Amazon. And what else is out there for self-published people? Brian's experience. Hang on, Brian's experience warmed my heart because something similar happened to me. I was terrified of doing self-publishing because my SF mentor told me that if I did, I would be poisoned to the traditional publishers. So I went away, and at Sarah Hoyt's encouraging, I published my own novel, and I made in 2 weeks more money than that novel had made in hardcover in 10 years.
Yeah.
And that told me something very important.
Yeah.
So
it told you had written something that readers enjoy and that you were able to put it out there and reach them directly, is what it told you.
Yes, it told me that the conventional retail, the TradPub retail conglomerate had failed me. And I had suspected that for a long time, and I was right. And I think the same thing is true of Brian's experience, and it's been true of a lot of people that I've talked to in Sarah Hoyt's universe who've had the same experience, that TradPub just isn't working. And if, in fact, we're going to see Amy's vision, we're going to have better TradPubs, way better. Than the people.
I think that's what Amy's hoping, is that the traditional publisher will change their model so they can still offer the same services that writers need, but that they won't be working on the model of the current New York publishers.
And the whole thing that's been left out of this whole thing so far is not just writers, readers. I mean, seriously, it would to me, Chef, that it seems to me that your book was well put forth in the format to the audience that you did, and it wasn't the best fit in the hardcover. Or, listen, I mean, Barnes & Noble is not a strong retailer, and the fault is not the authors of the individual books in the store. The fault is the company. All right. Their stores are dirty, crowded, they're not well merchandised, and you can see what's doing well in their stores, the cafe.
Yes.
Right?
in our area, we have a lot of really nice Barnes & Nobles, but something happened the last 2-3 years that made me really sad. I used to go into them for many years. My husband and I, we have 4 kids. We had 3 little kids at the time, and we were really poor. And our idea of what to do for going out when we couldn't afford to go anywhere was we went to the bookstore. Barnes
Right.
& Nobles had a free train table that would occupy the boys. John and I could browse books, and we'd probably have a coffee. And I used to go in, and I was so delighted that all my favorite children's books were there,
Mm-hmm.
where I could browse through them until
Yeah.
about a year or 2 ago. Now when you go into Barnes & Nobles, all they have is face out next to each other all the new books and the Newbery Award winners. But all the rest of the old children's books that I love, that I would have been so pleased
Yeah,
were still
the
selling and
classics.
still around. You know,
If-
let's take Lloyd Alexander. It used to be they had all 5 of his Prydain books. Now they have, you know, High King over on the Newbery Award thing, and the rest of them are gone. And they just changed from being a bookstore to being a new release store.
Exactly. I mean, if not just that, I mean, we could go into, and I mean, you're one customer, and the way to fix this is to go and talk to other customers, and to especially go to lost customers, like myself, all right? I have probably not bought a book in Barnes & Noble for 2 years, and this is kind of like saying a heroin addict did not go to the corner and get their drug fix, okay?
I go
All right.
there all the time, but I almost never buy a book. You're entirely right, by the way. My friend and I, we go once a week. He does buy books because he has reading time at work. I've probably bought, you know, maybe 5 books this year, if maybe more if you count some manga for my kids.
That's right.
And I buy a coffee when I go there. I go there, I look at books, and I buy or tea or something, you know?
Exactly. The cafe is doing wonderful. Everything else is doing terrible. And, you know, as far as the hardcore science, I call the science fiction and fantasy aisle in the Barnes & Noble the death aisle, because nothing ever changes there. Now, at my particular individual Barnes & Noble here in South Orange County, and there are a lot of younger families, and they're families exactly like you described, Jaji, and there's a lady I know right here in town who is a successful self-published author who is earning money for her large young Christian family by putting out these books, okay? And a delightful woman, and so anyway, the section of the Barnes & Noble that's doing decent at all, there are 3 sections. The inexpensive paperback section, which includes Larry Correa, one of his books were among the only ones selling. The mystery, cozy mystery, small paperback section, and the Christian books.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are doing well. That's what fits the audience here. And you're saying exactly right about the classic books in the children's area. They can't keep them in stock. So why don't they order sufficient to keep in stock and cut down on some of the others? Because there's no connection. Their system is so screwed up.
What I think I mean, I've been thinking this for years, and I'm waiting for this to happen. I know that they now have these Book Express machines where you can print a book on the spot. I'm expecting some bookstore to go to the model where they will have the cover and first 10 pages and back cover of tons of books. You go through, you browse, and you either get the book on electronically or you have them print it, you know? And I really wish somebody would go with a model like that, because they would have the space to keep many more books there.
You know, completely.
Right.
If you're just trying to go with the recent releases, you don't have a lot of titles. But if all you were trying to keep on hand was, you know, a small amount of the book to try to give a person an idea of what it might be like, even a small bookstore could keep a really large inventory. But you could still go in. You know, it's kind of like when you look on Amazon and you do that reading where they let you do the first few pages. It would be like that, you know. And I've bought books because I did that on Amazon. If I could actually hold it and look at it, I'd probably like it even more, because it's always frustrating to do it on Amazon. It always jumps to a spot that's not what I want to look at first. It's awkward. I don't know. I find the tablet, the Kindle software awkward, you know. But right now nobody's doing anything like that.
There are actually some libraries that are installing those machines.
Wow.
What a lot of people are forgetting about what book discovery really is. Book discovery is literally discovering a book. And then when we were kids, we would pick them up in the school library or in the classroom, wouldn't we?
Yep.
And so, of course, Scholastic is one of those powerful things because they still have those wonderful book fairs.
There is a wonderful letter that's getting passed around. I wish I had made a copy of it. I'll have to go search it down. And it was a letter to Forrest J. Ackerman. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he was a famous science fiction fan guy.
Absolutely.
Did you get that from me? It's a great letter. Did you get that from me?
You know what I'm talking about? The letter
Yes, of
from...
course.
Yeah. Maybe you could post it at some point or send it on to Jason and we could post it on the website. Yeah. It's this great article about how, letter about how even though your school teacher told you that my books are worth nothing, you can still enjoy them. And I've looked at the
Edgar Rice Burroughs.
It's Edgar Rice Burroughs talking.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said, the thing that struck me was he looked at the books that the teachers were making his sons read, and he thought the purpose of picking those particular books was to keep people from reading. And I just went to my kids' school and I looked at the books they're reading, and they're awful. And I had
Yeah.
don't want to read if this is their introduction to reading.
Yeah, we're all officially now on the same page.
I remember reading that. I was going to say, I remember back in high school, I was made to read 1984, and I it was all right, but
I thought, not in 1984, which I didn't really care for, but I thought like Animal House was a high point compared to some of the other things.
No. What I was going to say was, and I was like, and I sort of plodded through it, and I got there, and it was all right. But I read it again a few years ago, and I really liked it. I thought it was amazing. I didn't appreciate it at the time at all. It sort of, reading books of high school. Ugh.
The first person I ever read who hated The Hobbit had to read it in English class.
You know, I think we can add a fourth to Amy's reasons people don't read high school. Because I can.
Yeah.
We surveyed all these writers, and that was one of the top, when people wrote their comments, that was one of the ones. They said they think people get turned off reading in school because they get forced to read things they don't like, and then maybe at some point later on as adults they get time and they start to need to read for their jobs or something else draws their interest, and then they get back into it.
The book my daughter was given to read this summer for sophomore English, she took that over the summer, that by the end of the first chapter, a child had been raped.
Oh, my God.
Luckily, my daughter's English was not good enough for her to have understood what happened. But I wrote the teacher, and I said, look, my daughter, she came from an orphanage in China. She doesn't need to be told about the real world. She's already been there, and he let us pick a different book to read.
I remember that on your thread.
Yeah, he had to read a different book, and he was willing. Her friend asked her teacher, and her teacher said no. And this is just one example of several really awful books that I would not want to read myself that they're making my kids read. And I'm like, why can't you pick something fun? Why not have your kids read Percy Jackson? Why not getting them reading with something that's fun to read?
It's fun to read, and it gives them some mythology and other things. And oh my gosh, there's so many books that have interesting things in them that kids really love. And what the heck, Instead, it's a cultural thing, and I think it's a bad teacher problem. I don't know.
Maybe I was just going to say cough, social justice warrior message fiction cough.
Yeah, I think exactly. And I was going to say earlier, one of the delightful things that happened in the last 6 months, of watching people interact with the whole sad puppies thing, was all these, and some of them came from people who were not at all in the sad puppy kind of base. Some of this was, liberal guys who normally would have been on a very different side saying, I stopped reading science fiction because it was, and then they'd list qualities, and they're all the qualities that the sad puppies were saying. We want a book that doesn't have those qualities in it, Which, if you look at what Amy's saying, what we're really saying is there's two different markets here, and Market A is getting sold in New York, and Market B is just as eager to read, but nobody was putting out books for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I want to say, Jason, you might want to keep an eye on that cough. It sounds kind of nasty. You might want to get some Robitussin. But, yeah.
So what I'm saying is it's got to be brought into all the places where people will find and read books. And that includes our retail partners, It includes schools and libraries, and it's, yeah, not just Kindle.
Well, oh yeah, what you were saying. I mean, it ties together. Because we were talking
Right.
about how there's no engagement between the publishers and readers.
Do you want to come join us? John emerged, but he's not talking yet.
Oh, I mean,
some
of. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to throw my 2 cents in with the school reading thing. My mother, I was homeschooled from 4th grade to 12th grade, and my mother kept feeding me like Newbery Award winners and things like that, and none of them ever stuck. And what I wound up reading through most of my childhood, what stands out are all 21 Robotech novels over and over and over. And then once I was an adult, I started coming back to, I mean, as you can see, I've got the mecha here for my icon.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that earlier.
Comes with a flexible solution.
As an adult, I started getting interested in the influence on things, and that's when I started going to 1984, and I read Catch-22 and things of that. And I wonder if we were just not shoving this stuff down our kids' throats before they're capable of appreciating it.
One of my sons only didn't learn to read till he was 11, and he has not read very many books, but he has read 74 issues of One Piece manga. Which is a bit like what you said about the Robotech books. Okay, he loves it. And he was complaining to me. He finished a adult fantasy book, and he said it was okay, but he didn't get sucked in and just live in it like he did in the manga. So, while I'm eager for him to expand his reading, I'm delighted he's found something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's going to be different for different people at different ages. It just needs to be there for them, and I think this focus on things that are not story related, that are not core book reading concept related, such as a great story or characters you can have some empathy with, and frankly, the negative drumbeat is so.
Well, it's like what I said about, that it's like they're trying to rub the kid's face in quote unquote real life. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, they won't know about how horrible things are if we don't show them. And really, I think maybe there are some kids out there in that group, but I don't think there's that many. What we need to show them is something to be really excited about, and then they can find out about the rest on their own,
And thus the Superversive movement was born.
Exactly.
Real life will quite happily rub their face in it soon enough. There's no need to force that on them. That'll be fine.
As Chesterton said, children don't need to be told that dragons exist. They need to be told that dragons can be killed.
Yes, very true. Very true. I just realized yesterday how superversive fairy tales are. And it made me realize why there's so many attacks on fairy tales. Almost everywhere you look, there's somebody using fairy tales to do something that's the exact opposite of what fairy tales are supposed to do. So I think I'll write an article about it.
You should write an article. A few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there was a well-recognized short story that was a retold fairy tale, and it was by somebody who's well-recognized and received a lot of awards as a short fiction writer. And I just looked at that thing, and honestly, that bothered me so much, because what it was a retold version of child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And I'm so frickin' sorry. I understand that this writer was motivated to write that, but there are hundreds of thousands of people out there who've lived it and are also motivated to write about it as part of their recovery, but we don't need to take this and put that out there as entertainment to people. I'm so tired of this glorification.
And that's become common.
And honestly, that's one reason why 20% of people regularly buy and read books and 80% don't.
Yeah. Hey, Jason, if I get these columns written, it's going to take me a little while because I have to write a setup column for it. So maybe in a couple months, we should do a chat on fairy tales and on why Disney princesses are under attack and why fairy tales are being used to do so many unfairy tale things and which ones are good and all sorts of stuff. I mean, I think we could definitely fill a whole chat period just
we should. Jason knows nothing about fairy tales, but okay.
By the way,
well, you'll learn.
That's fine.
There's a great. Have you guys seen there's a documentary out now on PBS about Disney?
I haven't seen that.
It's really good. So if you have PBS, or it's probably online, it tells Walt Disney's story basically, and why his entertainment was so successful and has been.
Somebody just recommended that to me. Somebody just recommended that to me, but I haven't had a chance to watch it.
Well, it has the fairy tale thing too, and I mean it talks about all the classic Disney films and his idea of what people wanted in terms of entertainment and popular entertainment that would bring the family together, and so it's well worth a look. It presents the dark side and the light side, and it presents why he was such a great storyteller and motivator.
That sounds like I would love it. One of the things I wanted to cover in my article was how universal they are, how almost the same stories. I mean, because when I was young, I read fairy tales the way Josh read the Robotech stuff, and from all over the world, you can like get the same story almost, from Australia and from Japan and from America, and so that must tell us something about what general human beings want in a story, And they fall into different categories, but it seems to me it's worth looking at from the point of view of what does a reader like to see.
It does, yeah. Well, they do. They're the basis.
And the elephant in the room seems to be that there are groups in New York and LA who have wound up in control of what the public sees and reads and hears, and they're divorced from what the vast majority of the rest of the country wants. And like you got your story about the elves, these people don't understand. They've got the nobody I know voted for Nixon syndrome. So they're putting out things they like, and they don't understand. Well, why isn't this selling? Why are people rejecting this? We like this. And it's just different worlds,
Because it is. It's malicious in the sense that it's people who are able to function in their business doing what they please without focusing on the customer and what they want. Okay? And Walt Disney was different. He was always interested in the public, in the film goer, in the family. He wanted to do things, he wanted to relate stories to what they wanted. And he was very interested in that, and he went to great lengths to create things and to create a positive creative environment that could do that. So nobody voted for Nixon, but the same is true if you're an average Latino family. You are not, if you just go look at the New York Times bestseller list, and you're not going to see a whole lot on there for them. And this is a fairly recent development, because I had this one little article where I looked at the New York Times bestseller list from 1972, and it was like all over the map.
Yeah.
It was, you name it, anything. Each book you could see something that people in general would be interested in, and then you go and look at it now, and it's so narrow, and it's so tiny focus, and it's the same crap over and over.
Part of it is what they call the echo chamber effect, where I think a lot of these people really have no idea that everybody else doesn't agree with them. And of course, as the New York Times goes from being, one of the widely most read newspapers in the world to people don't read newspapers as much, it loses the broader awareness it had when, back in those days.
I see the Times making improvements, though. I mean, I see a more diversity on their editorial page. I mean, there was an article. I do not read these on a daily basis, but I look. When I go and read something, I do a little survey and I look. And the other day there was a wonderful article by a dad who he and his wife had chosen to have their little girl is in 3rd grade now, and she has Down syndrome. And the article was about how when his wife learned that the baby could be born disabled, that they felt they were being pressured to have an abortion, and they chose differently. And so his article was about that, and that I do not think that would have been published in the New York Times as recently as a year or two ago. So there's a lot of movement.
Someone I know. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it happened to me. It happened to me.
It did.
So I think that those there is it is if a publication is for the public, and the New York Times truly is. There, I see changes, I see growth, I see movement in the newspaper.
Well, basically, to one degree, they kind of have to change if they want to survive, because
exactly.
a lot of these things have picked a very narrow focus, and that
Yeah.
narrow focus is no longer, enough to keep them afloat. So they're
That's
having
right.
to flail.
That's right. That's right. But our New York people, and I feel really bad because we did have a really great conversation with Tom Doherty, and he was like, "Do you think they'll ever bring paperbacks back into the drugstore the way they used to?" And I said, "You know what? Yeah, I think they will. And we want to be part of that. I mean, we're one of the things we're talking about is putting a couple of books into convenience stores."
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story about that. Do you know one of the ways that books came to be there to begin with? You guys know that Louis L'Amour, the Western writer.
Yeah.
He was friends with truck drivers, and he just started giving his delivery friends copies of his books, and they would stick them on a rack in a store. And that's how he became this huge best-selling author, because his books were in these department stores and these grocery stores where there weren't a lot of books, and it was because he knew the guys who was putting the stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just thought that was a really interesting story. It showed what just a little bit of effort did by somebody who was, thinking outside of the box at the time.
That's right.
And he remained a writer when the whole Western, genre kind of tanked out, but he was still around.
Exactly, and
And
he's
awesome.
still around. He's still around today.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I put that little link to trajectory.com. If you go on there, you can click on Tom Doherty books, and you'll be possibly a little surprised, because it's their whole backlist. You can see who the bestsellers are on there, like people like him and Father Andrew Greeley, if you remember him.
I've actually read a bunch of his books years ago. Yeah.
Exactly. But there are some really basic elements of what is a good story in those things. And there's a big divergence between their books and that are still lasting today and some of the newer ones that are being put out. Because they're not focused on the story that the general audience is interested in. So, yeah. Thanks, you guys. We are on the same page. I know you don't know me well, but we're out there. We are not going to quit. We are not going to quit. We are going to continue to forge forward. So.
That's great news. I'm really happy to see a lot of the small publishers coming up, because they're looking for authors. They're working with authors. They're putting out things that people want to read. I've just found it to be, I think it's a big revitalizing effect, basically.
It is, and hopefully it'll be there in 5 to 10 years' time when the audience is much larger. And it will be.
Yeah, the paperback thing is very exciting, because, that jives with what I've heard Tom Doherty say. I attended one of his panels, and he said, we used to have the paperback market in drugstores, and that's where we would start authors off.
Mm-hmm.
And now we really don't have that anymore, so we really don't know what to do with new authors. It's just sink or swim. Well, we got to put you out in hardcover at full price and throw you out of the nest and see if you can fly.
Yeah, we're doing the exact opposite. We're doing ebook, softcover, hardcover. So.
What do you think?
In Tor nowadays they got rid of softcover and mass market, and they're doing trade paperbacks. The problem with this is that, if you look at John's current series, they all come out in hardcover. The first one came out in mass market. The rest have come out in trade paper. The mass market one you can still find in Barnes & Nobles. The trade paper, Barnes & Nobles treats it like a hardcover. They put it out for 3 months and they send it back. They don't put it on the long-term shelf. So the first book in the series is still there, and the other books are not. But Tor did this because they said they were no longer making money on the mass market because, as you said, the situation had changed.
What do you think the new version of something like the pulps would be? How they had those smaller ones, like books now are like 100,000 words, but they were like 50 and 30,000 back in the, so to speak, golden age. People could put out a lot of works. a lot of people got exposure. It was like
Yeah.
with the small publishers, a way for people to get exposure. Maybe there's
The
some
other
kind of thing
the
like
other
that
issue
out there.
again on the other side is I've never understood why there hasn't been a major push to overturn the Thor's Tool ruling. I mean, it wasn't meant ever to apply to books. If you guys are not familiar with this, it wouldn't affect
No.
you, Jason, but in America, in like the 80s or 90s, there was a ruling on whether or not you could deduct stock as a loss or a gain.
Yeah.
And they decided you had to treat it as a gain. And before that, publishers kept large back stocks of books. They deducted it as a loss because they hadn't been able to sell them. And writers could live for years on the same book.
Mhm.
Well, once they changed the ruling, now they have to add it as an asset, so they don't keep any back stock of books. Now, of course, ebooks is changing this, but they don't keep any back stock of books that are not actively selling, and writers have to write many, many new books instead of existing on their old books. And I've often wondered why there wasn't just more of an effort to get this to not apply to publishing, so that they, now I guess it doesn't matter quite as much now because ebooks, you can bring up your old books, but as far as the bookstores, wouldn't it be better to have a model of the tax law that actually supported the way bookstores work, so that you could have a backstock?
Well, I mean, surprise,
Tax laws that make
surprise.
sense? Come on.
No, all the bookstores do. All the bookstores don't even count stock. They put that whole aspect of their accounting as far as the retail stock that they have, in the store and so on. It's not even considered as stock in the store anymore because it's all the responsibility of the distributor.
Yeah,
And
I was talking about the publisher. It was the publishers who, like, let's say Tor. Tor used to be able, they could deduct off books of mine they had laying around. Let's say I'm actually not a Tor writer anymore because I just got my rights back. But let's say John's. While now they have to write off owning John's books as if that was money that they had that they have to pay taxes on. And that just completely changed the entire way that authors got paid and got supported.
They also changed, I believe that probably is part of the downward spiral that led to the bad situation that we have at present from the publisher perspective. Because it corresponded with them no longer really interacting with readers. It corresponded with not very strong connections between their sales force and retailers. And then, of course, there's the distributor behemoth, which we're with Ingram, and they're okay. They want to do better. They want to do better.
When I started working for Blue Jay in 1985, I think there were still like 200 distributors, and within a few years, 2 or 3 of them had bought the others up, and they had turned into 2.
Yeah.
And that was another issue. There used to be a whole bunch of different distributors who all would handle different publishers and handle them differently, hand-selling them. And when everybody's being supported by the same distributor, they're not supporting your books over the next guy's books.
No, they're not. And they want the big. They're in the same. In fact, they are probably the biggest driver of the giant bestseller thing, because it's a lot easier for them to like fill a warehouse with like one book, and the whole thing is like one barcode and it's one SKU. And
then they have to carry 500 separate little books and track them.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I think we've been here.
Yeah, we've been here. This is a long one.
I was going to say, we've been here like 2 hours, so we probably should wind down.
All right. It was interesting. Learned a good number of things here. I appreciate everyone's help and actually telling me about their experiences. And really also hearing the publishing side of it was really interesting as well.
Yeah.
Because it's all one cycle. You can't just ignore any part of it and expect it to be profitable business.
Brian, last words?
Yeah.
Or Josh?
How about both of us? Well, first of all, I just wanted to reiterate that for me, the decision to self-publish is not an ideology. It's purely cold-heartedly mercenary, and I look forward to a small press like a Chameleon someday, changing the dynamic and changing the model to something that's more equitable for everyone, so I can get down to the business of writing and focus on putting good stuff in the book. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't have anything truly profound to say. Although, if you're listening and you're a writer that's struggling to get into the publishing thing, the best way I can describe this is beating your head against a wall until the wall gives way. Eventually, it does, but so keep beating your head in.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Last words, Ben? Jeff?
I haven't really had to contribute here because I'm really here to learn from all of you, experienced people. Actually, not the model to copy. I completely failed at my self-publishing attempts, but I have a bit more hope now, learning what I've learned today. So, thank you for that.
Quick suggestion from me, at some point you should probably do a session on writing workshops and seminars.
Good idea.
I got a great deal out of my Clarion experience, even though it was 42 years ago, and I've seen a lot of writers gain confidence and skills in a very short time that they might have taken years to get by beating their heads against the problems. So just as a suggestion for a future session, I think that would serve your listenership very well.
We could wait till Brad gets back from being deployed, and then he could talk about Writers of the Future too, which would be kind of a nice.
Exactly.
Oh, that'd be cool.
And I
I'd
mean,
love to have
you've
that.
done that too, right?
Yeah, I'm 96 and 96.
Yeah.
No, I'm 98 and 99. Ron Collins, Scott Nicholson, and I are the only three who ever went to, got a finalist one year and then won a section the next year. So that's why we're best friends, is because we were exposed, Ron and I were writing partners. If you want to know what I'm like, Ron and Collins and I are best writing friends. And so we kind of share the same attitudes about a lot of things. But anyway, but Writers of the Future has expanded and grown so tremendously. I can't tell you about Clarion because I'm Clarion 1984. Clarion 84.
I have a friend who did Odyssey, and he brought me back a signed book by George R.R. Martin. So I guess George Martin was one of his writers. But I could ask him if we pick a time for that once, maybe when Brad gets back. Maybe you could ask one or two of the people you know, Amy, and I could ask my friend. And if the rest of you know anyone else we could talk about, there's a lot of different options of those kind of things. We could talk which ones seem to work, which don't.
Exactly. I think that would be so exciting and interesting, and especially how they've changed over the years and so much creativity coming out of them. We're doing writing classes for Chameleon, and we're going to start them in about a month. And we're going to seek to try to recreate the real-world workshop or classroom experience in those workshops. So I hope you guys are all kind of into it, and maybe might want to have recommend to some people to participate at some level. So we'll see.
It maybe by the time we get to this particular one, if we do wait for Brad, you'd have a graduate who'd like to come and talk too.
Yeah.
Someone who went through the program.
Jason, yes, he is. He's totally deployed. Oh my God.
I know Brad's really deployed. I just remember someone saying, "Oh, Brad's just making that story up so he can hide out from the Hugos and doesn't have to go to himself."
I'll
so
tell
funny,
you
but so untrue.
I know he's deployed. I've emailed him a few times. And
oh my gosh, what is wrong with people? Why would somebody say that? Oh.
Well, don't forget. Someone said Brad married a black woman as a defense from the charge of racism. They've been married 20 years. They have a child together. Brad plays the long game. So he
was playing. I love that. I love that.
That's funny if Brad wasn't one of the least kind of, the most kind of heartfelt, least long game type people I've ever met.
I know.
It's just absurd. But
I just, that is just the worst. And, he is the best. And I just think that people are so nasty sometimes.
Oh, we can all do our best to support him. Anyway, thank you, everybody. I'm not going to say anything else because I talked a lot. But thank you, Jason, so much.
All right. I will stop the broadcast there. Thank you, everyone, for listening.